Hey guys, welcome back to the Kaleido Roasters USA YouTube channel. This is the third portion of the series brought to you by Espresso Outlet on how to get going with your Kaleido roaster. So what we're doing is we're really diving into some of the fundamentals of roasting. We're not going super deep. We're just trying to have you understand the best that you can of what all these different things on your graph mean. So if you haven't watched our first two videos, I encourage you just to pause this video, go back. We have the first video, it's all about just the basics of artisan. It's kind of the fundamentals of what we find is going to really benefit you and some of the terminology that is going to help you as you get going roasting. Then the second one was all about your charge temperature and your turning point. So today what we're going to cover is the yellowing portion, which honestly, if you look at most graphs, as we discuss coffee, it usually has this yellowing phase from the point that you charge all the way to your dry end. But we decided to separate it out into two different videos. So if you could hit like and subscribe on this series, we're going to have more videos coming up. We're going to go over the next phase here in a few days about your Maillard reactions and development, as well as going into some videos on like creating a roasting plan and kind of analyzing some of these roasts. So make sure to check back on that. I think you'll really find it enjoyable as you get going with artisan. So why do we dry coffee beans? Well, coffee beans, they come and they have a natural, we'll just say approximately 10% moisture content in the bean itself. And whenever we introduce heat on something like this bean with some moisture, it's just going to naturally start drying out that coffee bean. Well, with our coffee roaster, what we're doing, and with the profile portion of the roaster, what we're doing is we are introducing heat in a manner that it is drying out the bean in a more controlled manner. So what is this doing? It's setting you up for your next reaction. Your next reaction, it's sometimes called the browning phase, Maillard reactions. What it's doing is it's taking the amino acids and the carbohydrates inside the coffee bean and is giving you a lot of those aromas and all the flavors that we're looking for. So if we rush through this drying phase, you're not really setting yourself up for a good Maillard reaction, and your coffee could be kind of baked, or it could just really not give the actual origin of that coffee that you're looking for. So a lot of times it's this kind of putrid. You'll get some of that really bright astringencies. That there are versions of that are very pleasing, and then there are some that aren't quite as pleasing. Doing this drying phase correctly is going to help you through that next reaction and set you up for success with the roast. So also during this drying phase, we can see after we reach this turning point, how quickly are our beans beginning to turn yellow. And this is kind of the phase right before the caramelization, right when the beans are getting dry, the moisture content is very low, and the caramelization of those coffees start to come through and you get that sweet smell. But at the same time, you don't want this going too fast. So this is a good portion of the graph to start looking. How is my roast progressing? Is my roast progressing very quickly? Are the beans turning yellow very quickly? Or are they just dragging on and you're just drying and drying and drying and drying? That's going to tell you that you need to up the temperature at this point. So we haven't really talked about rate of rise or ROR, or in the case of artisan, it's delta BT. But for the rate of rise, I'm typically looking between 18 and 25 through this drying region. And it's going to be quite a bit higher in the beginning because you're introducing so much heat into those beans very quickly. But that's not to say that 30 is incorrect. That's not to say that 20 is incorrect. It really depends on, number one, your roaster, your beans, the density of your beans, and even the way artisan is taking samples. So just from a traditional standpoint, before we had true profile roasters, they would use stopwatches, and they were looking at rate of rise per minute. So they would look after 1 minute, where's my temperature? After 2 minutes, where's my temperature? And they'd know their starting temperature and where they were at now, and that would give them their rate of rise. Well, with these softwares, it's doing it pretty much continually. So we're getting that continuous feedback, which is very nice because you're able to make changes on the fly much more quickly. So you could even have your rate of rise settings set up differently. So you might see people say, this is the gospel, this is the only rate of rise, and that's not necessarily true. So just understand the way that your software is set up, and just understand how your beans are responding to that. So in simple terms, the drying we already spoke about. We're removing some of the moisture content, but also this phase is called the yellowing phase. So a lot of times throughout this phase, you're going to go from a dark green. We're just going to use like a traditional washed green coffee in this example. You're going to go from a very dark green coffee bean. It's going to turn a little bit more pale olive green. Eventually it almost turns like a white color because you're going from the green to the yellow phase of drying your coffee. And then you're going to get that brighter and brighter yellow until you can see that caramelization and smell some of that caramelization come through. So as we're doing this, what we're really doing is we're getting to that caramelization phase, the next phase that we're going to talk about in a future video. And we're going to be pulling out that trier and we're going to be testing those beans every 20-30 seconds from when we dump. You don't necessarily have to do this. You can probably look through your sight glass, but I recommend as you're getting going with roasting, it's going to help you understand when to call dry end. Now, there is no magic answer for when to call dry end. And we'll discuss this a little bit more in a future video about making a roasting plan. But in this example here, typically from charge to dry end is about 50% of my roast. So I have a 10-minute roast here, and you can see it's a little less than 5 minutes. It's maybe not quite ideal, about 4.5 minutes. I would say 45 to 50 is pretty acceptable for from your charge to your dry end. Now our next two phases, it will be the other 50% of the roast. So that's a good way of knowing if your beans are going in a good manner. There are different types of roast. Maybe you're going very light. Those are going to roast a little bit differently. We'll talk about in future videos about maybe getting some of the origin out of that bean. So what does that mean? Certain beans have like a lot of fruitiness or an astringency that you may want to mask a little bit. So we can make some adjustments in our roast to get rid of those. So this pretty much concludes the first phase of roasting. And the first phase is your charge temperature, your turning point, all the way to dry end. We consider this the first phase in roasting. Next time we're going to talk about the browning phase, which contains Maillard reactions. Now we're not going to go into that a whole lot today, but if it's something that you're not familiar with, you might do a quick Google search on it. We are going to discuss it in that video. It's essentially caramelizing carbohydrates into sugar. So that's where a lot of your flavor is going to come from in your coffee. It's a very important phase. You can really change the origin of a coffee from maybe fruity to a little more roasty in flavor if that's something that you're looking for, or maybe you're looking for that fruitier coffee and you're going to want to make sure to adjust to not have those roasty notes. So I think that's all for today. So if you have any questions or comments on this video or future videos, you can feel free to leave them in the comments below. So I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.